If you are over 70, some subtle signs may be revealing that your anxiety has gone beyond normal limits and is robbing you of the peace of mind you have gained over so many years of life. What I am about to reveal will surprise you, because we often interpret these signs as a natural part of aging, when in fact they are cries for help from our mind asking for specific care. Over decades of helping people of our generation, I have discovered that there are 6 very specific signs that indicate when anxiety has gone from being just a worry to a force that dominates our days. Some of these signs are physical and you feel them in your body. Others are emotional and affect your heart. And there are those that completely alter our routine without us even realizing it. What strikes me most is how these signs appear differently in people who have our life experience. It is not the same as the anxiety we felt when we were 40 or 50. Our mature mind expresses emotional instability through manifestations that few professionals know how to interpret correctly. One characteristic of these signs is that they can appear at times that should be peaceful, such as while talking to grandchildren or watching television. Another aspect is that some signs manifest themselves through changes in sleep that go far beyond common insomnia. There are also those types of signs that affect our relationship with activities that have always brought us joy, transforming pleasure into a source of restlessness. If you recognize some of these patterns, I want you to know that you are not alone and that there is real hope for regaining that serenity that seems to have been lost. Each sign has a reason for existing, and more importantly, each one has a specific way of being treated with techniques that respect our age and experience. The knowledge I'm going to share today is the result of years of observing how our mind reacts differently after the age of 70. These are not abstract theories, but practical discoveries that have already restored peace of mind to hundreds of people who, like you, deserve to live their golden years with the inner peace they have built throughout their lives. Type yes. If you also feel that something has changed in your anxiety after turning 70, if you notice that your mind reacts differently to worries and you want to find out if these signs that you observe in yourself indicate that it is time to take care of your inner serenity in a new and respectful way. One transformation that moved me deeply was when I saw a 74-year-old woman who came to me thinking she was losing her sanity. She told me that she woke up every morning with her heart racing, but she couldn't identify the reason. During the day, she felt a constant restlessness that had no name, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen, even when everything in her life was fine. What she didn't know was that her mind was expressing uncontrolled anxiety through signs specific to our age group. After 6 months of applying the techniques I'm going to share today, she was able to sleep peacefully again and regained that inner serenity she thought she had lost forever. Today, she tells me that she can watch television without her mind wandering to worries, and she can talk to her family without feeling that inexplicable weight on her chest. What strikes me the most is how these signs of uncontrolled anxiety affect our generation differently. It's not like when we were younger, when anxiety would appear before a presentation at work or an important decision. After 70, anxiety can hide behind symptoms that we mistake for health problems, natural changes that come with aging, or even personality traits. Many people come to me and say they have lost the pleasure of activities they once loved. One patient told me she stopped knitting because she could no longer concentrate. Her hands were shaking, and her mind was racing to dark places. Another man told me he avoided family gatherings because he felt a tightness in his chest that left him breathless, even in happy moments. There's something very specific about anxiety at our age that few understand. We carry decades of experiences, some painful, some life-changing, and our mature minds can transform that emotional baggage into very real physical symptoms. The difference is that now we have fewer external distractions, more time to reflect, and this can intensify feelings that we kept under control during years of intense activity. I remember a time, perhaps you do too, when our generation had less knowledge about mental health. We grew up learning that worry was normal, that anxiety was a fad, that we should just move on without looking inward. Today, we know that our mind deserves the same care that we give to our body. What I have discovered through observing hundreds of cases is that there is a fundamental difference between normal anxiety and uncontrolled anxiety at our age. Normal anxiety alerted us to take care of something important, was temporary and proportional to the problem. Uncontrolled anxiety becomes a constant companion, distorts our perception of reality, and steals the peace we have gained with so much life experience. The signs I'm going to reveal are like a map that shows us when we've left the territory of natural worry and entered the dangerous region where anxiety controls our emotions. Recognizing these signs is the first step to regaining control and returning to living with the tranquility that our wisdom and experience deserve. The first sign that anxiety is out of control after 70 is when your body starts to react with intense physical symptoms to situations that should be normal or even pleasurable. I'm not talking about nervousness before a doctor's appointment, but rather disproportionate physical reactions that appear at unexpected times. One patient told me that she felt heart palpitations every time the phone rang, even though she knew it was probably one of her children calling to talk. Another example that struck me was of a man who developed sweating and hand tremors whenever he had to leave the house, even for activities he had always enjoyed, such as going to the bakery or visiting friends. Our bodies, after the age of 70, have a very particular way of expressing uncontrolled anxiety. The nervous system, which has already gone through decades of life, reacts more intensely and lastingly to anxious stimuli. This happens because our capacity for emotional regulation, although wiser, may be overwhelmed by worries accumulated over the years. The most common physical symptoms include palpitations that are not related to heart problems, excessive sweating in normal situations, tremors in the hands that were not there before, feeling short of breath without a respiratory cause, frequent headaches that doctors cannot explain, and that feeling of heaviness in the chest that appears for no apparent reason. What makes this sign even more worrying is that we often interpret these symptoms as signs of physical illness. We run from doctor to doctor, undergo tests that don't detect problems, and this generates even more anxiety, creating a dangerous, vicious cycle. One important discovery I made is that this type of physical reaction occurs because our mature minds have a harder time distinguishing between real and imagined threats. Decades of painful experiences have created an overactive alert system that triggers emergency responses even when there is no real danger. The body of a 70-year-old person who has lived through wars, economic crises, family losses, and profound social changes carries a very intense emotional memory. When anxiety gets out of control, this memory is activated and the body reacts as if it were facing a real threat, even during simple daily activities. I remember a specific situation where a woman came to me because she felt nauseous and dizzy every time she tried to cook, an activity that had always been her passion. During our conversation, we discovered that these symptoms began after she began to worry excessively about the possibility of not being able to take care of herself in the future. Her anxiety turned her kitchen into an emotional battlefield. The intensity of these physical symptoms is what differentiates normal anxiety from uncontrolled anxiety. When our anxiety is within healthy limits, the body may feel mild discomfort, but it does not develop symptoms that interfere with quality of life. There is a simple test you can do to identify if you are experiencing this sign. Notice if your physical symptoms appear in situations that were previously neutral or positive for you. If you feel palpitations when you see your grandchildren arriving, if your blood pressure changes when the doorbell rings, if you avoid activities that you used to enjoy because your body reacts badly. This indicates that your anxiety has exceeded safe limits. The good news is that our bodies also have an incredible capacity for recovery when we treat anxiety properly. I have seen people who have regained physical pleasure in activities that had become sources of discomfort. Type 1. If you recognize these intense physical symptoms in situations that should be normal, Type 2, if your symptoms appear mainly when you think about the future or about change. This helps me better understand how your anxiety is manifesting and personalize future guidance. The second sign that reveals anxiety out of control is when you lose the ability to be present in the present moment, constantly living in a mental state that oscillates between reliving past worries and anticipating future catastrophes that may never happen. At our age, this sign manifests itself in a very specific way. You may be talking to someone you love, but your mind is completely absent, processing a conversation you had last week or imagining problems that could arise tomorrow. It's as if your mind has lost the ability to rest in the present. One case that touched me deeply was that of a 75-year-old man who came to me because he could no longer watch television. He told me that he would sit down in his armchair and turn on his favorite program, but his mind would immediately start wandering between old worries and future fears. Within minutes, he would no longer know what was happening on the screen because he was mentally revisiting old family arguments or anticipating health problems that had not yet occurred. Our mature minds have unique characteristics that can intensify this pattern. We have decades of memories, many of them filled with intense emotions, and when anxiety is out of control, these memories take on a life of their own, invading moments that should be peaceful. At the same time, our life experiences have taught us that real problems exist, so our anxious mind uses this wisdom against us, creating increasingly detailed and terrifying future scenarios. What makes this sign particularly cruel is that it robs us of precious moments with loved ones. One grandmother told me that during visits from her grandchildren, instead of enjoying those special moments, her mind would be caught up in worries about her husband's health or anxiety about next month's bills. She knew she was missing out on unforgettable moments, but she couldn't control where her mind wandered. This mental pattern also affects our ability to make simple, everyday decisions. When we are constantly torn between the past and the future, we lose the ability to evaluate the present clearly. Choosing what to have for lunch can become a distressing decision because our anxious mind turns even the simplest situations into sources of worry. One thing that is unique about this sign in our age group is that it can disguise itself as wisdom. We think we are being prudent in anticipating problems or that we are processing past experiences in a healthy way. In reality, when anxiety is in control, this mental process becomes repetitive, unproductive, and deeply draining. I have noticed that people of our generation who develop this pattern often report a feeling that time is passing too quickly, but paradoxically, they feel that the days are long and tiring. This happens because when we are unable to be present, we lose our natural perception of time and the ability to find satisfaction in the small, everyday moments. The difference between healthy reflection and uncontrolled anxiety is control. When we reflect healthily, we choose when to think about the past to learn something or when to plan for the future to organize ourselves. When anxiety takes over, these thoughts choose us, appearing without invitation and refusing to leave when we ask them to. If these reflections are rescuing that precious ability to live in the present moment that may have been lost, and you want to continue discovering respectful ways to regain the mental tranquility that our experience deserves, subscribe to the channel because every week I share specific techniques for our age group. It is my way of accompanying you on this journey back to inner serenity. The third sign that indicates uncontrolled anxiety is when you develop a compulsive need to control aspects of life that are naturally beyond your reach, generating a state of constant mental vigilance that drains your emotional energy. At our age, this sign presents itself in very specific ways that are often mistaken for excessive caution or natural worry. You may find yourself repeatedly checking to make sure doors are locked, calling family members multiple times a day to make sure they're okay, or obsessively making mental lists of everything that could go wrong in simple situations. One remarkable experience was following a 72-year-old woman who developed the need to constantly reorganize her medications, even though she had a perfect system of organization. She spent hours checking and rechecking them, not because she forgot, but because her anxious mind created catastrophic scenarios about what would happen if she made a mistake. This constant vigilance was stealing precious hours from her day and leaving her mentally exhausted. Our mature minds, which have accumulated decades of responsibilities and experiences where control was necessary to protect family and take care of life, can become hypervigilant when anxiety takes over. The problem is that we now try to apply this same level of control to aspects of life that are naturally uncertain, such as the health of loved ones, social changes, or even the weather. This pattern also manifests itself in extreme difficulty delegating responsibilities or accepting help. One patient told me that she couldn't let her daughter shop for her, even when she was tired, because she had to personally control each item she chose. It wasn't stubbornness. It was her anxious mind telling her that only she could make sure everything turned out right. What makes this sign even more distressing is that our life experience has taught us that many things can indeed go wrong. We have lived through wars, crises, significant losses. Our wisdom knows the real dangers of life, and when anxiety distorts that wisdom, it convinces us that we can avoid all suffering if only we control every detail. A subtle but very common manifestation of this sign is the need to know exactly where each person in the family is at all times. This is not healthy curiosity, but an anxious urgency that only calms when we can confirm that everyone is safe. Some patients have told me that they cannot relax until they receive messages confirming that their children and grandchildren have arrived home safely, even when they are independent adults. The mental energy we spend trying to control the uncontrollable is immense. It's like trying to hold water with your hands. The tighter you hold it, the more it escapes, and the more it escapes, the more desperately you try to hold on. This cycle leaves our minds in a state of constant alert, preventing us from experiencing the tranquility that our age should provide. I remember a revealing discovery during a conversation with a 76-year-old patient. He told me that he felt as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, as if he were responsible for making sure nothing bad happened to anyone he loved. When we explored this feeling, we realized that his anxiety had turned his love into a source of constant suffering. The difference between healthy caregiving and anxious control is in the emotional response. When we care healthily, we feel at peace in taking reasonable precautions. When control is driven by anxiety, we never feel safe. There is always one more thing to check, one more scenario to anticipate. Recognizing this pattern is liberating because it allows us to differentiate between real responsibilities that we can take on and anxious worries that only drain our energy without producing real security. Our life experience can once again be a source of calm wisdom, not exhausting vigilance. When we look at these first three signs together, we begin to understand how uncontrolled anxiety after age 70 creates a pattern that simultaneously affects our bodies, our minds, and our way of coping with everyday life. The intense physical symptoms of the first sign, the difficulty in remaining present of the second sign, and the compulsive need for control of the third sign form a triad that can transform even the simplest moments of our routine into sources of emotional exhaustion. What I have discovered through observing hundreds of cases is that these first three signs often appear together and feed off each other. When our body reacts intensely, our mind runs away from the present. And when our mind is in the past or future, we try to control more things to feel safe, creating more physical tension. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal the other three signs that complete this picture. And most importantly, I'll share insights that can completely transform your relationship with anxiety. There's something very specific about recognizing when these signs indicate an urgent need for specialized care. Share this video with that loved one who you know has also been feeling more restless lately, because our generation has this wonderful characteristic of taking care of each other. Sometimes we are exactly the support someone needed to understand that there is a way back to peace. The fourth sign that anxiety is out of control is when you lose genuine interest in activities that have always brought joy and meaning to your life. This isn't laziness or the natural weariness of aging, but a deep emotional disconnect that makes things that once filled your heart with satisfaction now seem empty or even too heavy to deal with. One patient told me that she had completely stopped cooking for her family, an activity that had always been her way of showing love. She told me that when she went into the kitchen, she felt an inexplicable heaviness, as if each recipe were an impossible mountain to climb. It wasn't a lack of physical energy, but an absence of emotional connection to something that defined part of who she was. The fifth sign arises when your sleep pattern becomes deeply disturbed, but not just due to common insomnia. You may fall asleep normally, but wake up between 2 and 4 in the morning with your mind racing, processing worries with an intensity that does not correspond to the reality of the problems. It is as if your mind chooses the very moment when it should be resting to hold an urgent meeting about all possible anxieties. One gentleman described this experience to me in a very moving way. He told me that he would wake up every morning feeling as if he had to solve all the world's problems before dawn. His mind would create endless lists of worries, from simple practical matters to catastrophic scenarios involving the health of his family. The cruelest thing is that during the day, these same worries seemed much less urgent. The sixth and most worrying sign is when you develop a disproportionate fear of future change or loss, to the point of avoiding situations, conversations, or even thoughts that might remind you of the natural impermanence of life. This fear goes far beyond the natural prudence of our age and turns into an avoidance that severely limits your quality of life. I witnessed a situation where a woman refused to participate in any family event because she could not deal with the possibility that it might be her last meeting with a loved one. Her anxious mind transformed the natural awareness of the passing of time into a source of terror that prevented her from enjoying the precious moments that still lay ahead. This last sign is particularly cruel because it uses our wisdom against us. Our life experience has taught us that loss is inevitable, that change is a part of existence. When anxiety distorts this wisdom, it convinces us that we can avoid future suffering by avoiding the present, when in reality, we are missing out on the opportunity to create precious memories that could sustain us emotionally in the future. What makes these last three signs especially significant is that they attack fundamental aspects of what makes life meaningful at our age. The ability to find simple joy, to rest peacefully, and to accept the transitory nature of life with equanimity are all achievements of maturity that uncontrolled anxiety can completely rob us of. One important finding is that these 6 signs rarely appear in isolation. They form an interconnected system where each one feeds and intensifies the others. When we lose interest in activities we love, our sleep worsens. When our sleep is disturbed, we develop a greater fear of change. When we avoid change, we lose even more interest in life. The good news is that recognizing these signs is a crucial first step toward regaining control. Our mature minds have unique resources for dealing with anxiety, including decades of experience in overcoming difficulties, wisdom gained through overcoming challenges, and a perspective on life that can become our greatest ally when applied correctly. If you recognize 3 or more of these signs in your everyday experience, it indicates that your anxiety needs specialized attention, but it also means that you have the awareness necessary to begin your journey back to tranquility. Recognizing these 6 signs in yourself should not be a cause for despair, but rather a cause for hope, because it means that you have the awareness and wisdom to seek the care your mind deserves. Each sign we identify today has specific solutions that respect our age and life experience. Our generation carries a unique emotional strength built through decades of facing real challenges and overcoming adversities that shaped who we are today. This same strength that brought us here can be channeled to regain the tranquility that was temporarily lost. The most important thing is to understand that uncontrolled anxiety is not a weakness, it is not a lack of faith, and it is definitely not an unchangeable characteristic of our personality. It is a condition that can be treated with specific techniques, patience with oneself, and the willingness to apply our life wisdom in favor of our inner peace. Remember that seeking professional help when we recognize these signs is an act of self-care and responsibility. Our generation has learned to take care of everyone around us. Now it's time to apply that same care to ourselves. If this video has brought clarity to patterns you have been observing in yourself, please like this content so that more people our age can have access to this important information. Comment on which of these signs resonates most with your experience. Your courage in sharing may inspire others who are going through the same situation. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving weekly guidance specific to our age group, content that honors our experience and offers practical paths to emotional well-being. And watch the next video on specific techniques to calm the mature mind, where I share methods that have already restored serenity to hundreds of people who, like you, deserve to live their golden years with the inner peace they have built throughout their lives.